Community Governance Review Working Group. To the agenda, please. Do we have any apologies for absence?
I have apologies for absence from Councillor Jackie Smith, Councillor Lee Steptoe, Councillor Ray Wharton, Councillor Nikki Manterfield.
Thank you. Are there any disclosures of interest or dispensations in the room? Councillor Whittington.
Yeah, I'm a member of Barby Parish Council.
Anyone else or online?
Graham, I'm trying to get my video on there. Sorry, it's Louise. Hi, sorry, yes, it was just to say that I'd being kind of lobbied, kind of spoken to by Barby Parish Council as well, in relation to the topics that Mark was covering.
Thank you. Councillor Rice-Oxley.
No, sorry, no disclosures. I'd like to say something before I have to dash off when you get to it. Thank you.
Okay, so moving on to item number 3, notes the meeting held on the 29th of April. Does anybody have any comments and questions on the notes of the meeting held on April 29th? There are no comments in the room, no comments online. Can I have a proposal that was a true and accurate record? Councillor Stokes, a seconder. Councillor Westrop, all those in favour that this was a true and accurate record, please raise your hands. 4, any 5, any against? And any abstentions? 1 abstention. Okay, so that's carried. Thank you very much. Item 4, the Community Governance Review for Grantham. Graham Watts.
Thank you, Chairman. So this report provides the Community Governance Working Group with an opportunity to review an additional consultation exercise following the comprehensive consultation process that took place as part of the first stage of this Community Governance Review. Full Council agreed a recommendation for the working group to commence some further consultation with parish councils in relation to the proposed boundary for the unparished area of Grantham. Full Council did agree in principle to the establishment of a parish or town council for Grantham, but in order for it to commence its second formal stage of consultation, it needs to make a proposition in relation to the boundary arrangements, warding arrangements and number of councillors. The results from the consultation process didn't necessarily provide a clear steer in relation to the boundary. So Full Council at its last meeting agreed for the working group to undertake a further piece of consultation to provide a bit more information from residents and from parish councils in relation to what that proposed boundary should look like. So this report provides the working group with an opportunity to consider that particular element of consultation. I do have a map that I can put on the screen if that helps members to look at the areas that they wish to direct that consultation to. There are different ways in which we can consult. It's recommended that we do go along to meetings of the parish councils just to outline what this process consists of and seek their opinion as to where they believe the boundary should sit. Should a parish or town council be established for Grantham, and also consultation with residents. And again, we can undertake some direct consultation in writing to the properties that are affected or properties that you wish to hear from. But again, that's open for discussion today as part of setting out that scope for the consultation process. So happy to answer any questions or feed into the discussion as we go forward, Chairman.
Okay, are there any questions? I think Kathy, Councillor Rice-Oxley reserved her right to speak early there because I think she's got to leave early. Councillor Rice-Oxley?
Yes, apologies. Sorry, I'm going to have to just say this and then dash. Just 2 things. So I think that what Mark was saying about the unbuilt houses. So I think we sort of reserved the right to put in whatever document it is that as houses are built, there'll be further consultations over the years, whether it's 5-year mark or 10-year mark or something, as those houses are built. But my most important point is whenever we talk about any sort of status change, we ask the people themselves. So in the Scottish referendum, we didn't ask England whether they wanted to keep or give away Scotland. We asked the Scottish people whether they wanted to stay in the UK or leave. So I think for all of these existing houses that are on the edge of town, I have some in my ward of Arnoldfield. We've also got St Vincent's and St Wolfram's and the edge of Barrowby Parish, as well, as Mark's saying. I think, however, Graham, however is decided is the best method, I think it should be those people who are asked. I don't think it should be for Great Gunnerby Parish to say whether they want to keep the Arnoldfield houses or not. I think it should be the residents in those Arnoldfield houses that are on the very edge of town, living next door to someone who is in Grantham town. I think those residents should be asked, and it should be their choice, not our choice. There should be some method of proper referendum or consultation done so that the voices of those people living in those houses are heard. And I feel that very strongly, that it shouldn't be for us or for full council or for the parish councils to make that decision for those people, because it's quite a big change whether they stay in a parish council or whether they're going to Grantham Town Council. That's a big change. They need fully informing about the consequences of that decision, and I think that they should be allowed to make that decision. Thank you for letting me waffle on like that, because I've got to go. So thank you. Good luck with the meeting, everybody. Bye.
Councillor Morgan.
Yes, thank you. Following on from that, I actually have a question and a comment. I may have some more later, having listened to other people's comments, but I just wanted to ask why, where we're talking about the dwellings to be built, we haven't included the southern quadrant in that, because we're talking over 3,500 houses to be built, at least on that site. And also there is an aspect regarding the businesses. We're talking about where people live, but we've got a huge area also allocated for new businesses within the Southern Quadrant development too. And that kind of leads me on to, I have a real dilemma with this because I think the point was made earlier, just out of this meeting, that how do you ask people who aren't there? I have done some work specifically looking at the concept of the Southern Quadrant development. The fact it's become called Spittlegate Heath has been described as a green village, which indicates, in effect, it's going to be deliberately a designer area built specifically to have its own unique character. So it does, my original thought was it made sense to pull that area into Grantham. But when you actually look at the scale of that development, it's very possible that half those nearer the town centre may well identify themselves with Grantham, but it's equally possible that those further away, nearer Ponton, may well consider that they're actually part of the parish. And my dilemma is this the right time for us to actually identify where that new development should go? I think that there is something to be said that it may well be that at some point we have to do a separate exercise to include or not that development. I'd appreciate other comments on.
So I think Graham has spoken to this, that this is an ongoing as Grantham changes. Do you want to just answer that, Graham Watts?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I mean, that particular development, I mean, again, it's up to this working group to make a recommendation if it felt that should fall part of the town council's boundary, if and when it's established. That would form, if it wasn't, that would form part of a separate community governance review anyway. Once those developments have been built and there was enough residents in those areas to effectively kickstart a community governance review for that particular area, it may well be a separate parish in its own right. It may be amalgamated as part of another parished area, but that would be a separate community governance review process if it wasn't allocated as part of the Grantham boundary as part of this review, if that makes sense.
Councillor Whittington.
Thank you, indeed, Mr. Chairman. My fundamental problem with this report and with the two appendices there is because I think it doesn't. I'm struggling to see how this matches with what we actually agreed at full council. My understanding of full council is also Councillor Stokes' understanding that in terms of future consultation with parishes and houses, the full council had agreed to those hatched areas being shown on Appendix 1, because the specific question in the consultation that referred to those came out with very, very mixed results. As I recall, those in favour and those against were very, very close. So we thought that those probably did need extra consultation. And at this point, I really must put on the record my complete opposition to the comments that have just been made by Councillor Rice-Oxley, in which he said that parish councils shouldn't be part of the consultation process. I just think that I can't see how we can actually do this without consulting with parish councils. Parish councils are an integral part of this. I think, for any, as I say, I really would like on the record my official opposition to it, what Councillor Rice-Oxley said on the record, because I really am struggling with the logic behind that. For me, it's a complete negation of democracy not to consult with the parish councils. In terms then moving on to Appendix 2, now those areas, those development areas, they were subject to a separate question, the consultation. And overwhelmingly, the response to that question was an overwhelming rejection of any further extension into those parishes. Now, this paper that's been put forward seems to be saying that we should be having consultation with those parishes, despite the fact that the results of that consultation, I think it was 60–70% of people said there should be no extension into these parishes, and now it's somehow seems to be back on the agenda. Now, obviously, I declared interest as a member of Barry Parish Council, but certainly this matter was discussed at Barry Parish Council last night, and they're extremely angry about this because they see this point blank as a power grab, as an attempt by the fledgling Grantham Town Council, Stephen exists yet, to actually grab power and to actually grab land. So I really cannot support any extension into the areas highlighted in Appendix 2, because I think it goes against the results of the consultation responses that we got back, and also doesn't fit in with my recollection of what we actually agreed at full council.
Graham Watt.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll just for clarity, I just wanted to highlight the recommendation that was put forward by this working group to full council and the resolution that was agreed at full council in relation to the next stage of the consultation. On page 6 of the agenda pack, it does mention further consultation with residents and parish councils of neighbouring parishes to the unparished area of Grantham. I completely appreciate the comments in relation to the interpretation of what those areas relate to, and this meeting has the opportunity to agree the scope for the next stage of the consultation. So if at this meeting members agree that actually you've got enough information to substantiate a recommendation to full council in relation to particular areas based on the results of the first consultation, that's completely within the working group's gift to define the scope of the consultation to other areas that it feels the council requires more information from to make an informed recommendation to full council. So I just wanted to clarify that particular point, but the opportunity is here today for the working group to set the scope in terms of those areas that it wants to consult with further, so that this working group can make a recommendation to full council on the boundary of a parish or town council for Grantham.
Councillor Stoke.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I agree with what my colleague Councillor Whittington has said. With regards to the unparished, parished areas that I understood we were going to be looking at are on the Appendix 1 and relation to the addendum that's been issued on Map A, the 378 properties. We will, in my opinion, need to consult with the 3 parish councils that are relevant to that, as well as the residents. I do think we need to do both, but I do think cutting out the parish council is not an option, because it would look, as Councillor Whittington said, like a power grab, and that is not what we're trying to achieve. What we're trying to achieve is probably a more realistic boundary to the Grantham town centre. But overall, that is where I am with that. With regards to Appendix 2, I think that is something for the new town council to establish as houses are built, in my opinion. And I do think that would be taking that too far if we did that at this stage, because some of these developments probably won't be built out in 30 years' time. So, and the rest. So, I mean, we look at Appendix 1, and we have discussions with those parish councils with the hatched areas and the 378 properties. Thank you.
Councillor Clark.
Thank you. Mark and Adam, forgive me if I'm oversimplifying. So I had some conversations with the kind of Barry Parish Council as well, and it was my understanding from those discussions that the real kind of rub in terms of the kind of central issue is precept and financing. And obviously, as I kind of said when I was kind of chatting to a specific resident, there is obviously going to be a kind of boundary, you know, wherever that's set, in terms of the kind of parish council. And obviously there's going to be differences of opinion as to where that boundary is set, inevitably. And so I was just wondering, in terms of moving forward in a kind of positive way, if there was possible, you know, if it was in our gift to kind of say that we would kind of dovetail any, you know, taper any kind of precepts and things like that, basically kind of look at ways that we can kind of mitigate any potential acrimony as we move forward, because obviously this housing development is a big issue in terms of potential money for obviously Barrowby Parish Council. And so is there a way that we can say, you know, insofar as there's a boundary that includes, you know, some of these houses hypothetically, is there a way to kind of say, but we're going to taper any kind of precept over, you know, 5 years, 10 years, you know, whatever that would be, in terms of giving, making sure that the residents of Barrowby are as happy as they possibly can be.
Okay, Councillor West.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to sort of say that I agree with Councillor Stokes and Whittington that the people who are actually living in these areas, the sort of the ones that we already know about on Appendix 1, should be actually contacted and asked, as indeed should the parish councils. But I think we're trying to run before we can walk, because I think we need to think about the area that we have got on Appendix 1, and there seems to be an awful lot of change in the future on Appendix 2. So can we start with Appendix 1 and then go from there?
Okay, so there are a number of common questions coming up here, which I'd like to move ahead with, that I think we're all asking, where we can all take a decision, be it a vote on that. Councillor Morgan, is yours a clarification point before I move on to those questions? Okay, if you want to add, please, Councillor Morgan.
Yeah, thank you. I think when we first looked at this, the issue came up regarding the risk or perception of a power grab by the existing parish councils. And I think, actually, I would beg to differ. I don't think it's just about money. My daughter went to Barrowby School, primary school, for about 5 years, and it's a village with a very, very strong identity. And I think each of our areas where we have a strong parish council, they each have their own identity. And that's really what we're seeking for Grantham, its own identity. So my feeling is, in some respects, geography sorts this out a bit for us, in that there are some areas where it's very clear that, that we are talking about areas on the very edge of Barrowby, and it makes perfect sense that they stay within Barrowby. And equally, there are some areas, and I will look at Appendix 2, forgive me, but it's currently got planning permission, not fully developed. But if you look at SO8 1231, for example, that is very much really an extension of Grantham on this side of the A1. And though we need to be asking, where will they be using their resources as well? And I feel very much there's kind of a fairly obvious, almost like boundary line there. For me, an issue might be where you've got on Appendix 2, and forgive me, I'm looking slightly forward because it's all about timescales, isn't it? How soon will it be? We'll be looking at these, but we've got on boundary, Appendix 2, we've got GR3H2 and GR3H3. Now they are really geographically on the edge of Grantham. If SO8 1231 is completed, they will be on the edge of that rather than directly in any way linked to Barrowby. So to me, it would make sense. But I do think that as far as consultation goes, I would support actually Councillor Whittington and Stokes' argument. I think we should be consulting with the parishes as well and the residents who will be affected potentially by the change. I've kind of answered in a way the issue I raised earlier, which is what do we do when we come to the Southern Quadrant development? Because it also, although it has in many ways or will have its own unique identity, we also know part of the plan is to have routes into Grantham, pedestrian and etc., going through Grantham's parks. So if they don't support the precept of Grantham, I hate to say money does come into it to an extent, to what point are those potentially 20,000 people contributing to Grantham Town's precept for the facilities that they will be using? So I wish it were really simple. It's not, but it's not that clear cut. And I think it is something we do have to consider as well as we move forward. It would be ideal, I think, if we could come up with a series of rules that are sufficiently generic that we could apply them and agree those at this point, and then as we move forward, we can use those.
Okay, so there's a number of questions that we're all asking, which I think we should take a vote on. Before I do that, I have a couple of questions for Graham. So what has determined the hashed areas? And I mean, why would, for example, Alma Park not be a hashed area? That is an adjoining suburb of Grantham. Why would that not be hashed? Yet the tiny little bits that come off of St Vincent's be hashed. What has determined those hashed areas, and why are some hashed and some not hashed?
So the hashed areas on Appendix 1 are areas that are currently district wards. So for the district council, there's district councillors that have wards that expand into those areas that overlap the parish boundary. So they're part of the parish, but they are district council wards.
Okay, so the district wards on the on that side of Grantham that runs into Alban Park actually mirrors the borough ward. Is that right?
That's correct, and it was the Boundary Commission for England that set those particular boundaries for the wards, for the district ward boundaries. Okay.
And the timescales of consultation. Can you just walk through with us whatever we agree today? I'm always conscious of timescales, how long this is going to take. When are we thinking of, I mean, okay, fair enough. We've not told you what we've agreed yet, but when are we thinking of doing the next stage, Graham?
So I think the first stage of the consultation was 6 weeks. So it would be up to the working group to recommend a realistic time frame for this stage of the consultation. Based on the discussion that we've already had, if agreed, we'd be looking at 378 properties. So we could write to those directly. It's never a good idea to start a consultation during the summer because people are obviously away. So it could be something that we leave until after the summer. And then obviously depending on how long the consultation process lasts in terms of the time frame that you set, we'd then need some time to collate the results and report them back into this working group.
And if you can go a bit further than that, please, what would happen next? So let's say we did a consultation October, November. Let's say we come back with a line of where the borough is after that. After this group has then met, what would happen then, Graham?
So subject to the working group being in agreement to following the outcome of the consultation, it would make a recommendation to full council, and full council would then have to consider whether it was in a position that it could formally propose the town council or parish council a boundary for it, the number of wards that it's made up of, and the number of councillors that should sit on that particular council. That would then be the subject of a second formal consultation, subject to that process being completed and subject to full council being satisfied with the outcome of that consultation process. It would then be a case for full council to make a final decision on that proposed arrangement for a parish or town council for Grantham.
So just so that I understand that, because I mean, I know I'm jumping ahead here, but I just want to see where we are. So a consultation on the boundary, then a period of calculation of wards, councillors, a breakdown, there'd be some finances sort of calculated there. That's probably next spring. Then probably summer, autumn of next year, a consultation on the warding arrangements. So we are running up to the end of next year is a kind of a realistic time frame. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah.
Okay, fine. I do have a series of other questions actually. Did you have a point on that, or Councillor Moore?
It's like, no, but it is a really important point, especially if we start looking at money. Where do we envisage the town council will actually meet? And how, and where do we, at what point do we look at that? And where do we cost that?
So I think we're probably getting ahead of ourselves here, and I'm probably guilty of doing that because I've spoken about the next stage. But I think that's on one of the next two layers of consultation. So let's do one step at a time, if that's okay. Otherwise, we'll disappear down another rabbit hole. Councillor Whittington, do you want to comment on the timescape?
Yeah, I mean, I think that kind of fits in with our view that we thought the first elections would probably take place in May 24. I don't think we can have them any later than that, because obviously we need them to dovetail into the SK elections electoral cycle going forward. And so that would give the first Grantham Town Council 3 years to get itself established. Obviously I don't think next May is realistic. I think May 25 would be too late, because they only give that town council its first term 2 years, which I don't think is enough. So I think really we do need to be sort of trying to get all this done by the end of next year, so we can then start thinking in terms of the elections to that first Grantham Town Council being May 24.
Just to clarify that, I think what we're saying is the best case we can do here is for 2024. I mean, obviously, if things come up in consultation that make it longer, I'm afraid that's what will happen. But I think that's the best case that we can do. So going back to the questions, it strikes me as if we've got a series of questions here that we've all raised in various guises. I think the easiest one from my perspective would be how do we consult with houses that are not yet built? Now, a lot of questions have been raised about areas such as the southern quadrant and this sort of stuff. And Councillor Stokes has reiterated we've got no idea when any of this is going to be built. I think it's my take that you can't consult with houses that are not yet built. I mean, I would like to propose that houses that are not yet built are not in the scope of this consultation. I think that whilst they should be, and that there's an evolutionary process as houses get built to ask those communities whether they see their identity in Grantham or outside. I can't see a way that you can sensibly consult with a field, and that's literally what we're talking about here. So I think if we discuss that first, then we can move on to some of the more challenging questions. Councillor Morgan first, then Councillor Whittington. Thanks.
Thank you. I think there's a lot of merit to be said for that, especially given our potential time frame, and we know about the delays now with the Relief Road, which will have a knock-on impact on the housing. Forgive me for constantly parking about the southern quadrant, but it's next to our ward. However, there is a separate issue, unless Graham can come up with an answer for us, which I hope he can, and that is, if we don't come up with a conclusion, we will end up with a default situation, will we? Where geographically, for example, the southern quadrant would automatically land in the existing parish that land covers. Would I be right there?
Graham Watts.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah.
But again, as that gets built out, one would expect a town council to have conversations about where that identity was. Councillor Whittington.
Yeah, just on this about you can't have a consultation with a field. If you actually look at, on map B, the first line, the 300 in Barrowby, well, 104 have been completed, but there's still 54 under construction and 196 outstanding. I'm not entirely sure how safe it would be to consult with 104 that are completed. They may not all have residents in there, and potentially those residents then might decide something that might have an impact upon residents who might be moving in the future. Whereas at least with the 378 in map A, those houses are there. you know, they are long-standing. You know, they are complete. There's no further houses going to be built there. So, I mean, I can happily support consultation on those three, but in terms of anything else, I'm afraid I cannot support any consultation, because at this stage, I think at some point, yes, but that will potentially be when all of this is built out. And I don't think you can do it before it's all built out, because potentially you could have some residents then, in effect, you know, it's very, very difficult. I think until these schemes are individually completed, you can't then consult with residents to see where ultimately they want to be. So as I say, I'll support map A, Appendix 1. I'm afraid I cannot support anything regarding consultation on Appendix 2, map B.
You're jumping ahead to my next question, but I think that's noted. Again, I want to just talk about consulting on those areas that are not built yet. I'd like if we could make some progress on that, and those areas that are potentially going to be built at some stage in the next 30 years, if we can take those out of scope, we can make a bit of progress. Councillor Morgan, did you want to comment on that?
I'd just like to come back on your comment, because I think it's an assumption, and again I hate to go back, but I need to go back to Graham on this. If in the future, based on what we've been told, the Southern Quadrant development lands in its existing geographical parish, which is London and Harrowby without, then would it be actually up to Grantham Town Council to in effect call for that review, or is it actually down to London and Harrowby without Parish Council to call it? And is either correct, and should we actually have another category called to be decided or something like that?
Graham Watts.
Thank you, Chairman. So again, that would be the subject of another community governance review, and there are different ways that process can be started. So for this particular review for Grantham, the council itself decided to commence that process. It could have been commenced by a petition received from residents in the district council's area. So that again could happen for this particular area. So it doesn't have to be the town council per se. It could be the district council that commences that process, or a petition by electors in the South Kesteven area.
Councillor Morgan.
Is it a process that could be agreed now that it's automatically triggered, for example, after the building of X number of houses, like 2,000 houses or something like that, or even 1,000 actually, because that's bigger than many villages?
Graham Wall.
I'd have to seek advice on that, Chairman. A fundamental part of the community governance review process is public consultation, and as you've already highlighted, it's difficult to consult with a community that's not there yet because the houses haven't been developed. So it's something that I'd have to take advice on.
Sorry, may I just, I'm not suggesting we go ahead without consulting. I'm saying is once those X number of houses are built, that we then consult automatically with those people, rather than expecting them to go through what has been about 15 years process for some of us to get to this stage today.
Graham Watts.
Through you, Chairman, I'm happy to engage directly and provide a clear.
But I think what you're clarifying here is that if there was a community emerged on the border of the town council area that was clearly using the services of the town, walking through Dyser Park to get to the town centre, wanting access to the crematorium and things, the town council can initiate a community governance review in partnership with the neighbouring parish to discuss whether the boundaries are accurate given changes in the local communities. Graham Watts.
It's my understanding it would be either the district council's decision to commence that process, or the petition process. So the relevant parish council or town council may lead that petition process to ensure it's got enough signatures. But I think it is only a petition from the community or the district council itself that can request a community governance review.
So or the district council or the town council or the petition. So but there's three processes there, yeah?
I don't think the town council itself could commence the process. I think they would need to either recommend it to the district council or commence the petition process.
Okay, but that's still a process. That's still a process. Okay, so are we in agreement that areas that are not yet built out should not be part of the scope? I'd like to propose that. Do we have a seconder for that? Councillor Morgan, all those in favour? Any against? And any abstentions? Okay, so that's narrowing the scope. We're narrowing the scope here. So if we look at Appendix II, all these areas of the southern quadrant, etc., that are potential areas, we've taken those out of scope. So in terms of the scope, the hashed areas, first of all, so the hashed areas are on this map A and map B appendix that we've been given here. So map A is the appendix area. Let's talk about these first. These are built areas that are neighbouring Grantham. They're within wards of the Grantham Charter Trustees, but not in Grantham. Okay, do we agree that map A, the hashed areas, the top of the table addendum here, 378 houses should be within scope? Councillor Whittington.
Yes, I think so, because, and also I think when the consultation went out, the response that came back to those, I think it was it was kind of 50-50 in terms of wanting to stay or not. So I think that makes sense. And the point I made previously, and also been made by other councillors, the Boundary Commission have identified these as, you know, as we said, they're anomalies, that they're within district council wards. So I think it makes sense that those are consulted on. They are houses of long standing, you know, they've been there for a very long time. So I think those 378 should definitely be in scope.
Okay, Councillor Morgan.
Yes, I would totally agree with that.
Okay. Does anybody want to have a vote on? I think there's widespread agreement on map A things. Okay, good. So moving on to the map B area of this table, these are projects that are being developed. They're on the they're neighbouring the town, and they're under process of being developed out. So once they're completed, you would expect them to form part of the hashed areas, but they are not completed yet. In fact, if I look at this second one here, S142935, literally zero are completed yet. So there's frankly nobody to consult with in that area. So how do we envisage that we should treat these 4 sites? Councillor Whittington.
Yeah, I refer to the 2 I know, which are S143571 and S142935, which are the one that's sort of just south of Barrowby Road is known as the Collies. And the other one, those houses are being built out at the top of Dysar Road. They are actually within the existing Barrowby Parish Council area. And in terms of ward, they are within the Beaver Ward, which is a non-Grantham Charter Trustee area. So of those, only, referring back to the addendum we received this morning, of those, in terms of completed, there are 104 completed there. But this is back to my contention that this is not built out yet. And I think we've already said that things that haven't been built out shouldn't be within scope. So those I can't support at this stage consultation. I mean, I think once they are built out, yes, consultation would have to take place. But I think that is something the Grantham Town Council will have to do in the future. In terms of the second line there, those north of Dysar Road. They are currently in the process of being built, and they're being built at quite a quick rate. I imagine potentially some will be completed fairly soon, but I'm not entirely sure when any will be occupied, because as well, it says completed. Well, I don't think of those 104, I don't think they're all occupied anyway. So I think as well, there's a bit of a difference between completed and actually occupied, because in Barrowby at the moment under LVH3, we've got 49 completed. But at the moment, none of those are occupied. So I think we have to draw a distinction between completed and occupied, because they are two distinct things anyway. So at the moment, I can't support any of Map B, Appendix II, being included at the moment, because I think that's something for the future, something that the town council will probably have to take forward once it's constituted.
So just a couple of quick, you mentioned LVH3 there. That's completely out of scope. That's not an area that's neighbouring the town. It's totally out of scope.
But I was just saying of that. I was just using to emphasise the point that there's a difference between completed houses, because 49 of those are completed. There's nobody in there at the moment. And to use the same point of the 104, they may be completed, but they're not all occupied. So I think we have to draw this distinction between completed and occupied.
So the recommendation here, we'll talk about that. The recommendation from Mark, and we can discuss this, is that when the majority of these are completed,
and occupied, I would say.
I guess it's tough for us to okay, let's come on to that. But when the majority of these are completed, that they are consulted, but because only, well, literally 0 are completed on the second line, I'm not entirely sure how you would consult with 0 properties that are completed. You'd be consulting with builders. So the recommendation is that these are consulted, but at some future date, when the majority of them are completed, and I roll forward sort of 6 months so that they're occupied or something like that. I'll discuss that as well, but that seemed to be the recommendation there. We and Mark didn't have an opinion on the other two because they're outside of your area. Is that right? Yeah.
And just one point of information: of the 104 completed, the last count that I think, because I know somebody who lives there, and he reckons there's about 70, 80 of the 104 currently occupied.
Councillor Morgan.
I think in some respects it's unfortunate that we've got labelling the sites with planning permission and then separately the pink housing allocations demarcation, because certainly, for example, for S14 3260, I know that development from sitting on planning, that isn't yet built. It's clearly been given planning permission. But I would argue, actually, if it does go ahead, that they're very likely to want to identify with Manthorpe, actually, that particular development. I wouldn't see that as identifying with Grantham. There isn't anyone here from the area. I would suggest that because of the actual location of it, and the line may well be the difference between the existing housing below and that new development, which is right on the edge of Manthorpe village.
Okay, so we've got a third one. The third one added to the list. That's we're not saying they shouldn't be consulted with the. We'll talk about how in a minute. But when a majority of them are completed, and I think completed from the district council's perspective means they're paying council tax. I just don't see another way that we can mark them as completed. But when the majority of them are paying council tax, that we can then allocate funds to consult them at some stage in the future. But that doesn't look like something we can do immediately. Does anybody, we're talking about those three, we'll come on to the fourth one in a minute. Does anybody else have any comments on that? Councillor Morgan.
Yes, sorry. Devil's in the detail, isn't it? If we take that decision though, and then go back to those we excluded earlier, can we not apply the same rule to those?
Well, as what we've excluded in what we've but there is a difference, because what we excluded earlier was where 0 were under construction. There's just an allocation where there's 0 under construction, 0 completed, 0 outstanding, just a large number approved. So I think there is a difference. These are sites that are being built. So I do think there is a difference, Councillor Morgan. So let's just talk about.
If I can clarify, because I think, and I'm happy to be corrected, but I don't think S14 3260 has a single house up yet. That was actually subject to an appeal, which delayed the whole process. Have they started building? No, there is no building. So that should actually technically be potentially pink. So it has permission, but there's not a house built there.
Okay, fine. I'm happy to take that off of this list. If we're, are we happy to take that off of this list? Okay, let's take that off of this list then. So the only one we've not discussed here is Poplar Farm, S08 1231, which is a huge site, 673 already completed. Is there any phasing on this development? Councillor Whittington?
I think the fundamental difference of these 673, as the note says, they are currently within the Grantham unparished area. So I mean that's a fundamental difference. They are within the existing Grantham unparished area. So without any question, they should at some point potentially, so maybe as part of when we are looking at warding arrangements, we may have to potentially allow for a ward there. Potentially, I don't know. So because I think we've got any issues with anything within the Grantham unparished area. I'm quite happy with that. It's those at the moment outside the unparished area where I can't support.
We're coming on to that. So okay, thank you for that clarification. So they are to be included in the initial phase. Thank you for that. So they will be included in the initial phase. Are we all happy with that? And we're saying that for the other 3 areas on here, until a majority of them are completed, we'll allocate funds, but until a majority are completed, we'll just allocate that for once a community starts to emerge there, once a majority of those phases are completed. Are we all happy with that? So in terms of the scope, Graham Watts?
I think a key element as well in consulting in relation to those particular developments is the consultation with the Parish Council, because they may have a view. I mean,
we'll come on to that question about the how now, if that's okay. So we've got our scope. There's been discussion earlier on about the how. It strikes me that you could either consult with the residents directly, or you could consult with the Parish Council directly, or you could consult with both. Which of those three outcomes do you think we should take forward? Councillor Whittington.
I think the consultation should be with the residents of the houses, obviously. I mean, I think they're fundamental. I think you also have to consult with the parish councils as well for their view. I think that should be the limit of it, because they are the people, as Councillor Morgan referred to, these emerging communities may decide that actually, we want to be part of Grantham, or actually we want to be part of a parish. So for me, they are a key consultee. Going forward, because it's probably likely that these consultations will only happen once the town council is established anyway. So the town council will obviously have to be a consultee, but also the parish council would have to be a consult.
You're jumping ahead a little bit here, Mark, but yeah, okay. So you're proposing to consult with both the residents and the town council and the parish council. Are there any comments or questions or objections with that? And then we'll talk about the how again, a bit more detail. Councillor Morgan.
Just adding further, I agree with that, but just adding a further potential consultee, which might be the district councillors as well.
Thank you. I think adding in the district councillors, I think is a good idea. Councillor Whittington.
And possibly the county councillors as well, if we consult with the district councillors, because I don't see any county issues potentially there maybe.
I don't think that's a big effort. So the county council as well, I think, is an excellent idea. Okay, so those 4 parties we've agreed we're going to consult with on all of these areas. So in terms of the how, we are now talking about quite a modest number of houses, sort of 500, well, a bit more than that, 1,000 houses or so. Surely the best method of consulting is to write directly to these obviously attend the parish councils, and to write directly in partnership with the parish councils to those residents, and get a prepaid envelope. Councillor Whittington.
I thought potentially of those, only 378 are currently in scope, are actually currently built.
Sorry, I thought we just added 673 to it as well.
I don't think all of those are actually still built.
They're marked as completed.
They are. Sorry, yes. I'm looking at the wrong columns. Yes, I agree. Sorry, yes.
And to allocate funds once the majority of the others are completed, but they're not completed yet, to allocate funds in case they're completed over the next year for the others. But in terms of the how detail, it should be a small enough number that in partnership with the parish councils, we should write to those houses to explain the community governance review. Is that what we think? I mean, first of all, how much would that cost, Graham?
Just some clarity on the numbers. I think the 378 is the number of properties in the areas on Appendix 1, which are currently warded to the district but located in parishes. So there's 378 properties there. I think there's 673 properties in the Great Gunnerby consideration is that they're already in the Grantham area. So it's not necessarily worth consulting with those properties because they're already in Grantham anyway.
Okay, so they've already been consulted with effectively. Okay, thank you for that clarification. So it's a small enough number. Again, I'll just reiterate, if you want to go through our budget, because obviously we signed off a budget from the district council, what sort of impact would writing to and getting return paid envelopes to the 378 and allocating funds for a future date to consult with other areas once communities are in place? Do we have funding to do that? Graham Watts.
Yes, that's within the budget. I think it would probably be in the region of £500–600 to undertake that particular consultation, which is within our budget.
Councillor Morgan.
That it seems to be it would be good to offer some form of face-to-face opportunity for people who might have questions and things.
Isn't that the parish council meeting?
It could be that people could go to that. Or have representative from the council, the district, be there to answer questions.
Councillor Whittington.
Yeah, I think Councillor Morgan makes a very, very good point because I'm assuming, I know Great Gunnerby has a parish council as a whole, and I think the other two do as well. So it probably would make sense if there is a village hall to have consultation meetings there as well. And if there isn't a suitable village hall, I'm sure we could probably find somewhere, couldn't we? That's fairly close. I mean, I'm not sure about Londonthorpe, but St Anne's Church Hall's not too far away from Londonthorpe, is it really? So I'm sure we could find areas.
In terms of the detail, I think we need to work with the different parish councils to work out which is the best approach. But I think that's relatively low cost in terms of the cost impact, the actual writing and getting a return paid envelope to those houses and allocating funds for a future consultation with those areas that are not built yet, but we consider on a neighbouring area. I think that's the impact of the funds. So it sounds as if we're in agreement on that. Do we need to take a vote on that? Councillor Morgan.
To make a suggestion, because when we had the public consultation on the Southern Quadrant, which I asked our planning officers to arrange, what we did was we used Witham Place has a communal area, because it's actually geographically much closer.
I think we're getting into detail
here.
It's
just to help the officers out.
Yeah.
It's much closer to that area than Somerby is.
If we can take some of the detail out to help the officers deliver this, do we need to vote on this? I think we're all in agreement that that's the correct approach. Okay, so is there anything I've missed in terms of questions to get us to a recommendation, Graham? And do we now need to put this to full council, or can you just go ahead and do this in the autumn? Graham Watts.
Thank you, Chairman. The only thing I just wanted a bit of clarity on, so the scope, I think, in terms of the hatched areas is absolutely fine on Appendix 1. But whilst we're consulting with the parish councils, particularly in relation to Belton and Manthorpe and Great Gonaby, I'm just looking at Appendix 2 and the site S143260. At the moment, and I appreciate there's no houses completed or built on that site yet, but I'm just thinking the ward boundary at the moment goes through the bottom part of that development site. So I don't know if this is an opportunity to consult, as we're consulting with the parish anyway, whether we want to ask them in relation to the boundary pertaining to that development site, because once that's complete, you've got a significant part of the site that's not in the town boundary, but a very small proportion of it that will be.
Councillor Morgan.
My understanding was, and I think Councillor Stokes backed me up on this, is that there aren't any houses to consult at the moment. That was the issue. I think I would agree with you if there were, or as they come on board, that they should be consulted.
Graham Watts.
I wasn't suggesting consulting with the residents. I'm thinking whilst we're consulting with the parish council, is it worth asking the parish council their view as to whether a change should be made to the boundary in relation to that development site?
Councillor Whittington.
I think potentially that could be jumping the gun because we don't know whether the parish council might have one view and future residents might have another. And I think it might just complicate where we are now. I'd be very, very surprised if Belton and Manthorpe Parish Council aren't aware of that development coming anyway.
I think that clouds a very clear decision we've made today to consult with residents. I mean, one of the key decisions we've made today is that the parish councils have to be consulted because it's important that they plan their finances, etc. But it should be the residents that are consulted. So I take your point, Graham, and it's probably worth raising that in case they volunteer it. But I suspect that may be something for another day when these houses are constructed. A majority of these houses are constructed. Okay, so do we have any other points, any other business today? I think we've made some progress there. Councillor Whittington.
Did we get an answer from, do we need to take this back to full council or not, or can we just go ahead and do it?
Graham Watts.
I think we'd need to just tweak the timetable associated with the community governance review. You have delegated authority already to do that in relation to the timetable. So I don't think any further approval is required from full council. It's within our budget and the proposal in terms of the next stage of the consultation. So I think we can implement that through your delegation, Chairman.
Councillor Morgan.
I asked earlier, it was quite a serious question about where the town council meet. The reason I'm asking that is because full council, I didn't vote for it, but full council voted for the sale of the council, district council offices. And I think it raises a question. There's a practical decision that's got to be made in view of the changes occurring within the governance of Grantham. And I think it needs to be looked at potentially as part of that decision making or even design process. We need to know where the council will be. Yeah. I think it is an important question. We need an answer sooner rather than later for everyone's sake.
I think it's a fair comment, and the question is minuted. We'll certainly return to it. At the moment, we're still defining the boundary of what Grantham is. So I think it's definitely one of those questions that would be more productively answered once we understand the boundary of the town. So we'll minute that question. We'll return to it at a later stage of the consultation when more detail is to be discussed. Councillor Whittington.
Yeah, thanks. I think Councillor Morgan raised a very good point about where the town council would meet, and I'm pleased it's been minuted. But I always assumed, maybe incorrectly, that the future Grantham Town Council would meet in this chamber. It would make the logical place for it because it's geared up for a meeting of that sort of size with the microphones and everything.
That's minuted as well. As I say, we're definitely moving ahead. We've not even specified the boundary of the town yet. So let's focus on the boundary of the town. Some of these more detailed questions are important, and they have been minuted. We'll return to them at a later stage. I would like to bring the meeting to a close now, but Councillor Morgan, you have a final point. Thank you.
Sorry, I know I'm an awkward what's it, but it used to be my job asking awkward questions and then designing a solution. I'm not convinced by your response. The reason I'm saying that is because the boundary in a way of the town is irrelevant to this question. It's not a critical constraint around the boundary of the town, but it is a critical constraint that we have somewhere for the town council. So actually, in a way, you need town council where it's going to be almost before you agree where what the boundary
Graham
is.
Watts.
Thank you, Chairman. I mean, that's not really part of the community governance review process. The process of this review is to set the appropriate governance arrangements for the area through consultation with residents in relation to and other statutory consultancies in relation to the boundary, the warding arrangements and the number of councillors. How the council operates is not part of this process. This process is to agree whether or not parish council or town council should be established. And once that order is placed, it's then up to the particular council to agree its operational arrangements. The parish clerk would be responsible for ensuring that the council met at a certain premises that was adequate and convenient. So that isn't part of this community governance review process.
Okay, thanks for that clarification. But those concerns are minuted and they are concerns shared in the chamber. So it's now 11:04 and I'll bring this meeting to a close. Thank you all for your attendance today.